Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Coach Krisler's Convos. Today, I am here with Dr. Evan Hirsch. So if you are new here, just to let you know, this is an informal conversation where friends and colleagues share their experiences with functional medicine. And so I have invited Dr. Evan here to share his story. So before we jump into your health journey, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, first off, Krisler, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Evan Hirsch, and my story, the reason, and I focus on fatigue and low energy. So I'm on a mission to help 1 million people increase their energy naturally without prescriptions so they can have more fun and success in every aspect of their lives, whether it's professional, personal, or whatever. And that comes from my story. So when I first started my residency in family medicine after I came out of medical school, I fell in love with my wife, who very promptly got chronic fatigue and was, debilitated for about 3 years before she got
Wow.
mostly better. And then we got married, had a kid. I started my medical practice, and a couple of years after that, I got chronic fatigue, and it lasted for about 5 years and just about destroyed my life. Where to the point where, my wife, she's just coming out of chronic fatigue, and she needs my help at home with the baby and with chores, and I can't do anything. I could barely work. I had to keep hiring people to do my job. I had 10
Mhm.
employees and 4,000 square feet of office space, and I couldn't run the place and I couldn't see patients. So I had to keep hiring people. I was taking naps underneath my desk, until I finally, and I was gluten-free, dairy-free, eating a healthy diet, practicing functional medicine, but I wasn't applying it to myself. I mean,
Mm.
I was eating right, I was prioritizing sleep, I was doing all the lifestyle stuff, I was meditating, but I still got chronic fatigue. And so I was like, there's
Mhm.
something that I'm missing here. And so I started doing some more research. And, they say by your patients, you'll be taught. And that's totally true. Every time I would go off and I would see something that I couldn't treat or I couldn't help in front of me. And so I would go learn something else, and then I would come back, and then I'd be able to help that person. And then I could help the next level of illness severity in my practice. And the better
Wow.
you get, the more sick people you get, and you just have to keep getting better if that
Mhm.
is in fact your goal. So I went from holistic medicine to integrative medicine to functional medicine to environmental medicine, which is really
Wow.
where I live today, because what I found was that I was limited by functional medicine. It's great. It's a great paradigm, finding imbalance, all these different areas. But what I found that I didn't get the correct education that I needed was in certain environmental things. So like heavy metals, chemicals, molds, infections like parasites and Lyme
Mhm.
disease, Epstein-Barr virus, other viruses, now long COVID. Those were all things that I didn't know a lot about, and I had a lot of those. And
Mhm.
so I had to go through and figure out all the causes that I had. I had around 30 different causes that I had to remedy. I have found now that at this point in time, we found 39 different causes that we work on. And everybody that we see with fatigue has a combination of 20 different causes. So it's never just one thing. But my
Yeah.
story is that I figured out the causes that I had, slowly went through that process of getting rid of them, and now I'm feeling great, and wrote a book about it, and now on this mission of helping people.
That is fantastic. Wow, what a journey you have been on. Just thinking about all the things that you experience that are supposed to be exciting times that are bringing joy and, connecting you with getting married and having a child and starting this really great business and, building your practice. These are all exciting things. These are all things that, people really that are stressors, right? But they're supposed to be positive things. And yet, in all of that, you were still feeling, extremely fatigued, and obviously, eventually found out that you had chronic fatigue after your wife had chronic fatigue. So in the time that you were kind of working through, before you realized you had chronic fatigue, or maybe before the official diagnosis, let's say, what was that like for you? Just like going throughout your regular day.
So I was very used to pushing through.
Mm,
That's how you get through college. That's how you get through medical school. That's definitely how you get through residency.
mhm,
So I just thought it was a post-residency lull, and then, the big thing was then we've got a newborn. And so now you're up. And so then all of a sudden my sleep, which was really my biggest thing, I was always a good sleeper. All of a sudden
mm,
now I'm not getting enough sleep. And that was one of the straws, really. But for me, it was, waking up in the morning and not wanting to get out of bed,
mm,
feeling like I could stay in bed all day, having awful brain fog, where if I was conducting this interview, I would be forgetting words back and forth. I wouldn't be able to complete a sentence. Now, fortunately, I was able to be present with people in the moment when I
mhm,
felt like I was still providing good care. At least I hope I was providing good care. But then fortunately, I had an electronic medical record, but once they left my office, I couldn't remember anything about them unless I had my medical chart open in front. So just brain fog, body pain, the crushing fatigue. Fortunately, I was still sleeping besides my daughter being young, but those were the symptoms that I had, and just feeling overwhelmed, trying to
mhm,
manage the 10 employees in my practice. I was never able to get a good practice manager to help support me in managing them, and then also trying to see patients. So it was a very stressful time.
mhm. Yeah. And there's so many layers there that you're dealing with the with the baby, and this lack of sleep, and your wife, and her coming out of what she was dealing with, and yet you going into this, and the practice and so forth. So it's just like, it makes me think of an onion. You peel back a layer, and it's like, well, there's more there going on. It's not just one thing that's happening. um, so, with um, once you realized, okay, what was the moment that it was like, this is way too much. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. I'm not able to fully, give to my patients or my wife or my child the way that I desire. Where were you at that moment?
I was napping underneath my desk at lunchtime, looking up at the bottom of the desk, and I'd probably been doing it for a couple of years at that point in time, and I was like, "F this." You know, I'm done.
Done.
I was already taking a bunch of supplements to replace the deficiencies that I had that I learned about from integrative medicine and functional medicine. I was taking adrenal support and mitochondrial support and these things, and they were kind of just helping me get by. But I was like, I'm missing something. And so then I
Mhm,
went on this journey of seeing as many doctors as I could and going to all these conferences and reading all these books to figure out, okay, what are all the potential causes that I see, that are present, and then going through and figuring those out. But unfortunately, the physicians that I saw some of the best in the country. They got me, maybe a little bit better. They had like one unique idea potentially, but it's really
mhm,
this combination. The people that we see, they've got this combination of heavy metals, chemicals, molds, and infections, and it's usually multiple infections. It's I call that the toxic matrix, where their practitioner needs to have knowledge on all of those things in order to be able to help them. Because if you miss one of them, then you're not going to be able to get as well as you could.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm just, visualizing you under your desk, taking that nap. And, I've certainly been in that spot as well, where I've been, you know, in graduate school, again, pushing through, reclining my car seat to take a nap, or, I have children as well. And I know that what those nights are like, multiple times waking up and so forth. So, yeah, what a difficult time that you were going through. Something else too that you mentioned that really struck me, and I think that this is something as a culture we deal with, is you mentioned you were good at pushing through.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of people just deal with it, right? They just think, well, I'm a busy mom, or, I just started this new business, or I have 5 kids, or, whatever it is, whatever life is looking like for them at that moment, they think, well, this is just normal. I'm just tired. This is how it's supposed to be. And it's like, no, vibrant is how it's supposed to be, right? If you're feeling constantly fatigued, if you're not able to handle this, deal with the stress in healthy ways, if you are snapping back constantly, all these different things, that's not the norm. That is something in your body is saying, we got to fix this. There's something going on. You have to investigate. So yeah, so that really stood out for me when you said that. I think that's a common thing that I hear, at least in coaching. It's like, well, this is kind of just how it is.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And it's very common in our community of people who've got fatigue and have pushed through is perfectionism.
Mm,
It's this internal pressure that we put on ourselves in order to achieve an unrealistic expectation. We actually, as part of our program, we have a trauma-informed coach who happens to be my wife, Stacy Hirsch, and she every single month she has a journaling practice or an expressive
mhm,
writing practice that she does for 4 days of the month. And the last couple of months have been on perfectionism. And
mm,
and perfectionism really is this combination of I'm going to butcher it, but it's unrealistic expectations and internal pressure and internal criticism. That's what it is.
mhm,
And so it's something that we all need to work on. That's why we have a mindset component in our program. That's why we have an emotional component in our program as well, in addition to the physical stuff, because all of it has to be addressed in order for people to live their best life.
Absolutely. I love that connection between the mind, body, spirit, and the physical. You cannot separate them. They are intertwined. You got to address all of those things. So as you are, investigating and looking into what types of things could really be wrong, that thing or maybe multiple things that are really going on with you, um, what did you find was helpful for you to that kind of stood out as, oh, this might really be the thing?
So I would say that as I was figuring out these different causes, I found out that they could really be divided into deficiencies and toxicities. And the deficiencies are things that are not in the body that are supposed to be there. And this is what a
Mhm,
lot of people are doing, adrenal support, mitochondrial support, thyroid support. We call those the big three.
mhm,
And then vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and then lifestyle habit deficiencies, not enough good food, not enough good water, not enough good movement, not enough good sleep, and neurotransmitter deficiencies. And then the toxins are some of these other things I mentioned, which I call the usual suspects: the heavy metals, the chemicals, the molds, the infections, the allergies, the negative emotional patterns or trauma, the electromagnetic fields, and or structural integrity issues. And so dividing them into these deficiencies and toxicities really made a lot of sense to me.
mhm,
And when I figured out that I had Lyme, I had several different kinds of Lyme infections, Bartonella, where I had pain on the bottom of my feet. We were actually in Canada on vacation, and I woke up in the middle of the night with this awful foot pain. I hadn't stepped on anything. There was nothing
mhm,
that I could see, but I was freaking out. I do not do well with pain. And so I told my wife, I said, we've got to go to the emergency room right now. And so we've got gosh, how old was my daughter? You know, several months old, maybe, 6 months old, maybe. And so she's like, it's middle of the night. You want me to drive you to I said, yes, you got to take me to the ER right now.
wow.
And so we drive down there. Long story short, they didn't find anything, took an x-ray. I mean, I think it was like $300. This was like 20 years ago in Canada in the emergency room.
Mm,
And but what I learned in hindsight after a number of these things is that I had Bartonella. I had pain in the bottom of my feet. I had muscle cramps,
mm,
oftentimes in my calves, oftentimes at night. I had sleep issues. I had anxiety. I had some depression. I was cold all the time, cold hands, cold feet. I had thyroid issues. And people don't have to have all those symptoms to have Bartonella, but I found that Bartonella was a really big one for me. I found that parasites were a really big one for me, which had led to my chronic constipation. I had a
Mm,
bowel movement like once a week for the
wow.
first 25 years of my life until I learned otherwise. So I really couldn't get rid of the toxins that I was accumulating. I also learned that I was FOS. I was full of stuff. I was this accumulation of all of the tuna fish that I ate growing up and the mercury fillings
Mhm.
that gave me a bunch of mercury. I was eating gluten and dairy when I was growing up. This was the 80s. We didn't know any better. I
Yeah.
was, I was exposed to mold. I had formaldehyde poisoning from gross anatomy class. I was bitten by ticks and kissing people who had Epstein-Barr virus and Lyme and all sorts of things. And so it just accumulated in my body until I met my wife. And then we swapped bugs, which is very
Mm,
common to see, where oftentimes people will say, when we got together, that's when one person got sick, or sometimes both of them get sick. Sometimes it's you move into a moldy place together, but sometimes it's you swap bugs. And we don't know if she gave me Lyme and I gave her Epstein-Barr, or vice versa, or we gave each other parasites, or whatever it was. But
yeah.
that really contributed, I believe, to her chronic fatigue and then to my chronic fatigue. So it was really identifying this chronology and kind of like making sense of my story. Because oftentimes people, I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and then I'll shut up. Speaking to somebody yesterday about long COVID, where they were like, they were saying, all of a sudden, 17 months ago, I got these symptoms,
Mhm.
came out of nowhere. But the reality is if we actually took a look at their life, you saw that there was this accumulation where all of a sudden the straw that broke the camel's back
Yes.
was COVID that they had.
Yes.
But it was a lot of stuff that led up to it. And then it's unwinding those things. And like you said, the layers of the onion, it's removing the heavy metals, chemicals, molds, and infections, because those things are actually causing 80% of these deficiencies. And so this
Mhm.
process really is all about removing the toxins, but we can't go directly at them. And so I have a 4-step process that we can talk about if you want, about how to actually remedy all these causes.
Wow. Yes. Man, that was a mouthful. And,
Hmm.
it makes me think about two things. One is, in my coaching training, we talked a lot about a person's timeline, right? What does, even before they were born, what did that
Right.
look like, right? What's going on in their family background? What were behaviors and things like that of their parents? And then as children, what did they experience? Did they take antibiotics or whatever it was, right? What were all these things leading up through their life to this moment? And I think we've done a disservice, again, in our conventional medicine model, that we've separated everything, we've compartmentalized everything. It's like, well, you got sick today, but that doesn't really have to do with anything that happened 10 years ago. Well,
Right.
actually, it really does. So I think that that's really important that you pointed that out. But also, it made me think about Dr. Carrie Jones. A lot of times will refer to filling your bucket, right? So you're filling your bucket with this or that, the stress of one thing, and then something else happens, and then you have this particular illness and this particular diagnosis, and then your mother, gets sick, and all these things, and your bucket gets full and full and fuller. And at some point, you can't put anything else in the bucket. The bucket is like, I'm done. Right.
Hmm.
And that's, it sounds very similar to your situation where there were, things going on that were adding to your bucket, and your body eventually was like, yep, I'm done.
Yep.
I can't add any more to this bucket.
Hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah,
Yeah.
and one thing you mentioned in terms of the compartmentalization, a perfect example is what we're seeing right now with long COVID,
Mhm.
where if you go to a long COVID clinic, you've got a lung doctor, a heart doctor, a GI doctor, and they're
Mhm.
all treating your symptoms with the tools that they have conventionally. But the
Mhm.
reality is that you've got a persistent virus that's in different parts of the body that the immune system can't handle, and you just have to get rid of the virus in order to get rid of all of your symptoms. You don't have to see
Mhm.
all these different people, but
Right.
yeah, it's definitely a disservice in the conventional model. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, yeah. And that's all, back to getting to the root cause of the problem, right? Not just masking the symptoms.
Mm.
So I would love to hear if you wouldn't mind just sharing a quick synopsis of your 4 steps. I'm assuming that these 4 steps were steps that you went through personally to, deal with your issues, but obviously working with people who are dealing with similar things, what are these 4 steps?
Yes, quick synopsis. I'll be very brief here. And it's what I did, and it's what I also found through lots of trial and error with people in my practice. So the
Hmm.
first step is to figure out the causes that an individual has. So of these 39 different causes, I said that everybody's got a combination of about 20 of these causes. Now, fortunately, 75% of these 39 causes can be determined by symptoms alone. So when someone joins our program, they go through step 1, they figure out 75% of their causes, and then the rest of the program is fixing those causes. So then in step 2, we're replacing the deficiencies, the
Okay.
hormones, the vitamins, the minerals, etc., to make the person as strong as they can possibly be to deal with what's going to happen in step 4. Because this process is all about step 4, removing the toxins.
Hmm.
However, you have to be prepared. And so that's what step 2 and step 3 are for. So step 2, replacing the deficiencies. Step 3 is opening the drainage pathways, the liver, the
Hmm.
kidney, the lymph, the neural lymph that's in the brain, the gallbladder, the intestines, making sure that when you start to grab things in step 4, heavy metals, chemicals, molds, infections, etc., you have a place to put them so you can actually get them out of the body. Otherwise,
Right.
you put them into a drainage pathway and they're just going to go right back into a different compartment. So that's step
Mhm.
3. And then step 4 is removing the toxins.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like it can be quite involved. I would assume that obviously you've got this down, but people may come in overwhelmed with okay, there's 39 things that could be wrong with me, that could be going on. Um, how do you take somebody from, oh my gosh, this is so much, to, okay, let's get started?
So it's really about going through that process. Once you figure out, and fortunately, so in step 1, all of our questions, it's basically a checklist that we have people go through based off the symptoms that they have. And fortunately, there's weird enough symptoms where we can determine which causes, most of the causes that an individual has.
Mhm.
And so they're able to, just after a couple of hours, know 75% of their causes, and then you can start fixing them. So a lot of it is the clarity. There's 2
Mm.
reasons why people don't get better. One is they don't know all of their causes, and they think it's Epstein-Barr and they're just so focused on that, or they think it's Lyme and they're so focused on that and they're missing a whole bunch of these other problems that they need to fix. And the second reason why people don't get better is that they don't have a mentor who's actually been through this before, who actually knows how to treat all of these things, who can navigate the bumps in the road, because there's always bumps in the road. You're pulling out all of these things that have been intrinsically in your body, like you said, since birth.
Mhm.
Moms dump all their good stuff and not so good stuff into their babies, and that's your first accumulation. And so you have to make sure that you've got a mentor that you resonate with who can kind of guide you along that path.
Yeah. Key is having guidance. Again, I feel like with much of the conventional medicine model, there's a lot of, here, take this, I'll see you in 6 months,
Right.
or here, take this, we'll check your blood work in a year. And the 6 months or the year goes by and that person isn't any better, or maybe they're a little better, or maybe they've had new things pop up in that time frame. And it's like, there needs to be that consistent connection, that needs to be there, that consistent check-in and accountability, and making sure that the things that are working stay in place, and the things that aren't working, well, we find something else, we look in a different direction. And that's definitely something that I enjoy about functional medicine, and certainly about what you're doing with looking at all these environmental issues, is there's a lot of investigation. It's a lot of bloodhounding, right? You go after it, and if you lose the scent, right, on that one trail, then you pick up another trail and go for it that way. So yeah, that's very, very helpful to hear. So as we kind of come to a close, I want to ask you two last things. One is, tell me about Dr. Evan now, right? We've heard about what you were like when things were really difficult for you, and you were dealing with the chronic fatigue and all the different stressors that were going on. What's Dr. Evan like now?
Mm. There's a big priority and focus on my mental health
Mm-hmm.
and my physical health with a lot of the tools that I have learned along this journey. So when I wake up first thing in the morning, I go through our 4-step mindset practice. Um, and then I do some breath work. And then I get in the sauna. And then I do burpees and yoga. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just doing like 5 minutes of yoga and burpees, but it's enough to kind of get my blood pumping, get things
Mm-hmm.
moving, stretching me out. I do the most important stretches for me. Then I'm having a breakfast, which is paleo. And then I'm, moving throughout my day. I'm a singer, so I prioritize singing throughout the day. I have a
Awesome.
competition in musical theater coming up in a month, and so I got to get prepared for that. But so in making sure that I shut down at a certain time, I'm spending time with my family. I start getting ready for bed at 8 o'clock at night. I'm asleep by 9:30. So there's really a focus on what do I need to do today to improve my health even more, to love myself even more. Focused on that. A lot of it is on the mindset side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I am hearing that you prioritize with intention and
Hmm.
that you are consistent.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think those two things take you very, very far in whatever you're doing, whether it's a health journey or in a business or in building relationships. Prioritizing with intention and being consistent gets you on that long-term road for success.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
said.
Awesome. So the last thing I wanted to ask you was, if, you know, if there's someone out there that is like, man, I don't know, I think there may be stuff, or, I grew up in a home with mold, but 30 years later, and they're kind of on the fence, what would you say to them?
I would say every single day you have to commit to learning something new and moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, if you had mold when you were 5 years old and you lived in a place for 6 months, that mold is still in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So, so the reality is that, but you can't get stuck in education mode. A lot of people are consuming lots of summits and watching lots of podcasts, and they don't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to make sure that you're taking action and that you're moving forward, and so much of this is about, you've got to sometimes kiss a lot of frogs in order to meet a prince or princess. When it comes to finding a mentor, when it comes to finding a coach that you can work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, that's a really big part of this, is that, you have to realize that the coach that you get next may not be your end coach, but they're going to be a coach that's going to teach you something that you need to know, something
Mm-hmm.
that they said resonated with you. You connect with them, you proceed on this journey with them, and then you get off in 6 months. If you're not getting the results that you want, 3 to 6 months with a practitioner, you should have a really good plan, know where you're headed, know what things look like. um, so yeah, I think that's a really good message, is that take action, get connected with somebody, continue to move forward, and do it with a positive mindset. Gratitude, and envisioning what you want for your life are two major parts of the mindset practice that we recommend.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. If people want to connect with you, if they want to find you, where can they go to get more information?
So people can actually text me now. And so if you go to my
Oh,
website at energymdmethod.com and you click on a button in the lower right-hand corner, that'll come directly to me, and we can text back and forth at your convenience. I'm also on every place in social media. We have a free Facebook group, the Energy MD, and check out our YouTube channel.
fantastic. Well, I have to say personally, I follow you on Instagram and I love, your content. I love what you put out, and I also get your emails. And it's great information. So guys, check out the Energy MD, follow Dr. Evan, get all of the information, connect with him, and now text him. What a cool feature. So until next time for Coach Krisler's Convos, I am Krisler, and I will see you next time right here. Take care.